Have you ever played a game where the story goes like this? There's a dragon in the sky. The town is burning to the ground behind you. There's a backdrop of war on the horizon. Families are starving, and you are the last hope of this world's salvation. Then John Guy walks up to you, and with the lowest amount of affect humanly possible, while the world is in apocalyptic turmoil just behind him, tells you, "Have you been to the town smithy? The best steel in all of Caldonia."
Help! Help! Help!
The effect or impact of story in games is something I've always found semi-inconsistent. Some games are smaller scale and only affect an individual community or small group of people, and yet impact me as far more serious than games with grand scales and huge dramatic set pieces. Even though these larger scale stories might actually be well written, sometimes I find myself having a hard time connecting or feeling the impact of them, and instead just feel like a bystander. I've recently been playing Baldur's Gate 3. Like everyone else. And it got me thinking that the story had a lot of impact for me. It made me care about what was happening in the world, even though objectively there's way too much going on for it to work in any other medium. And yet, despite the winding story and the frankly confusing amount of D&D lore I didn't know about, the story still felt natural and consistent to me. This got me thinking about what makes this possible. What about certain game stories makes us care about the world and what's happening? Some games counter this affect issue by making the main character a fleshed out individual that already has motivations and is rooted within the world you're playing in. Why is it then that even though Baldur's Gate 3 has far more fantasy nonsense than something like Skyrim, I find myself taking it far more seriously than any Bethesda game I've played? What about this game makes this happen? I realized while playing and looking at the way that people are interacting with the game, that it's the characters. And I'm not talking only the main cast. Even the supporting characters have well fleshed out storylines and feel like a real part of the world. They grow and change along with the things that you do within the story, and it adds so much impact. Instead of the guard, Phil Dude, walking up to you and saying he used to be an adventurer like you until the rain made his fake knee ache, the guards are instead entrenched in the intense socio-political landscape of the city. You talk to a guard in Baldur's Gate, and even though it's not a real dialogue, they complain about the safety of their station. They talk about the refugee crisis. They show irritation with the citizens or empathy for their plight. And despite them all having one line, it makes the dialogue feel real and grounded. It creates a landscape that lends credence and seriousness to the story beats that are majorly important. There are so many little characters that, despite having relatively small impact on the story, feel like real people. The tieflings aren't just some people you save and then forget about. They have real lives and aspirations. When you save the husband of the newlywed couple and you reunite them, I cried. It was so genuine. It felt so real. The impact they have on the story goes even further. They make you more invested in the world by they themselves being invested in the world. You can very easily let them die. So it makes it very heartfelt when you get to the end and they've made it this whole way because of you. And since you actively participated in getting them to this ending section, there's a real attachment and feeling of achievement in watching them accomplish what they've been talking about this whole time. The blacksmith finally opens his own shop. His gear is the quality that he's wanted it to be this whole time. The tiefling bard, Alfira, makes it to the tavern that she talks about at the beginning of the game, and although it doesn't work out the way that she wants it to, she's happy that she made it there just the same. Before I get into talking about the companions, I want to discuss a small feature that I think was huge in making the story and the world feel so genuine. You walk into conversations that are already happening because they don't actually concern you. This seems small at first, but it's a huge world-building factor. Our character is not the center of the world. Hell, they're not even the center of this person's story.
I don't know, man. They just haven't been the same. He's been gone for so long since he volunteered to fight the Absolute. When he came back, he wasn't the same. Well, I mean, it could have been easy. Things are hard out there. Yes, the city is struggling, but I'm sure it's much worse outside of these walls. I just want my brother back. I miss what it used to be like. Why are you just standing there? Yeah, can't you tell this is a private conversation? What do you mean you can get my brother back? He's already back. Yeah, he's been in the city for weeks. You gonna try and help? You don't even know us. Yeah, who are you anyway? Thank God that guy finally left. Yeah, what was his problem anyway? I don't know, man, but we were talking about your brother. And how am I supposed to help him? Alcor! What have you done?
It doesn't feel like this world is a performance put on to satisfy my crippling main character syndrome, but instead it's a living, breathing thing. They're arguing before you even show up, so you know they care. It's their lives at stake, not yours. Think about it this way. A lot of RPGs, conversations are entirely dictated by the character's participation. So it feels like the world doesn't move unless you're there. And that makes it so much less impactful. I tried to play Starfield recently, and it just felt so flat. Every time I talked to somebody, it felt exactly like the performance that I was talking about earlier. I'm the main character. Nothing happens unless I'm there, and I just don't care because of it. But I think the combination of this and the story's malleability makes it seem as though each of these situations matters. Now on to the juicy, meaty part that makes this story feel real. Astarion and Shadowheart. You want to fuck them.
Yep, that's me.
Karlach 2. Also Halsin, if you're into bears. And Gale, if you like a simp. Oh, and Lizelle. Also, you can fuck a demon and die. What a way to go. When your companions not only feel like real people, but have genuine investment in the actions that you take and the world you participate in, it makes a huge difference. It adds nuance to the story. It gets even better when characters have differing opinions from one another and argue over the actions you take. This creates a tapestry of interaction that feels alive, that makes the world feel lived in. It's the difference between walking into the IKEA set-piece version of a home or walking into a real house with dirty plates and trash. Yeah, it doesn't look as good at first, but you know it's real. It was a terrible metaphor. Now, obviously, I mean more complex opinions than kid good, undead bad. This kind of shallow opinion in a character is so lazy that it can detract from a well-written one. So it's important to really dig into these simple opinions by crafting some kind of character relation to them. It's one thing for a character who is objectively good to like kids because kids good, and another for them to have been traumatized as a child so they see pieces of themselves in struggling children. Shadowheart. Hell, Baldur's Gate made me question the nature of an objectively evil goddess simply through the devotion of a seemingly good character. Let's be clear here. Shar is the goddess of darkness and emptiness. I don't know about you guys, but that gives me bad vibes. Rancid vibes. I mean, maybe that's just me, you know? I just don't like the idea of removing the memories of your followers and turning them into husks of people, you know, that they once were. But, you know, that's just my opinion. Maybe you like the idea. Kind of weird, but maybe you like it. These kinds of character interactions with the world are the backbone of a well-written video game story. Without them, games are forced to dump exposition on you with dramatic music in the background just to elicit an emotional response. Sometimes I get tired of being forced to create meaning in a lazily written world. Now, all of these things come together to create a storytelling experience that removes you from the voyeur position and places you within the world. But the impact of morals in a story like this is a little bit more complicated. This is actually something I've heard some complaints about in regards to Baldur's Gate 3, and I was hoping to talk a little bit about why people feel this way. There is some criticism about the evil playthrough of the game. People saying that they don't feel like they're rewarded for it enough, that they don't feel fulfilled in the way they do when they play non-evil playthroughs. I'm just going to start off by saying they shouldn't be. I hate to break it to you, psychopaths, but slaughtering a camp full of innocent refugees should make you feel bad. The game shouldn't reward you for it, and it doesn't. It makes you feel like shit. Nikki Jakey makes some points about something similar in his video about Last of Us 2. For moral repercussions and impact to be had in a game, a player needs to feel like they were the catalyst for that moral repercussion. They need to have the ability to decide not to do that thing for the morals to really hit. That means all those crazy assholes who murder people just for fun, you know, shouldn't be rewarded for it outside of loot. There should be repercussions if the story has a moral to uphold. And I hate to burst your murder hobo bubbles, Grove Slaughterers, but the world of D&D has objective good and evil, and you chose evil. So feel bad. All of these things that I've talked about really stand out to me, especially with the release of Starfield recently. I have tried to play this game. I have tried to care about the story, and I just can't. There is so little incentive for the player to care about the world they're interacting with that I find myself aimless. The characters feel flat, defined by a single trait or action or role. The world feels empty, devoid of the personal touch that a lot of Bethesda games have had in the past. This isn't to say the game is irredeemable. There's a charm and fun to be had playing it, but the narrative feels so bland and uninspired without character interactions that I find myself just not caring. I'm not driven to do anything, to care about the world in any way. Not every game has to be a narrative-driven, heavy thematic game. But this doesn't mean that these storytelling strategies are unused or ineffective in these scenarios. Sometimes all it takes is an interesting, invested character to make the world feel more fleshed out, even if it's goofy. Games like Apex don't take themselves seriously, but part of the charm of these character shooters is that the characters are interesting. They say funny things that fit them, and that's all it can take to drive a more interesting experience. Mirage is vain and goofy, but it works because his entire kit is designed around him being obsessed with himself. Game developers can learn a lot from the successes of games that are outside of their genres. And there's something refreshing about a game that takes itself seriously enough to have real character interaction with the world. Sometimes taking these techniques and putting them inside of a genre that traditionally doesn't have it can make a game huge. Look at Hades. It took the narrative-driven interest and added it to roguelike genres, which was not something people were particularly interested in the narrative of, and it blew up. But I digress. Thanks for listening to me rant about Baldur's Gate story. Peace.